stopped doing them for a minute. They're a lot different than lives on Instagram. A lot of different people join on YouTube, and so it makes it kind of interesting what kind of commentary you get. So I wasn't sure if I was on board or not, but I also don't want to only be on Instagram because that does seem to be my main source of comfort as well. So it's huge comfort level is what I feel on Instagram. Not as comfortable on here on YouTube because again, it's not my it's not as a close-knit community so much. It's I feel like these get shot out to everybody. So I taped down 100% cotton paper onto a plexiglass board. It's an old piece of art that I did before that I didn't love, so I'm going back and reusing all my pieces of paper so that I get double use out of stuff. What I'm going to do, I don't know what I'm going to paint, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start and wet my paper with my spray bottle. Just a super inexpensive spray bottle that you need to keep filled or it doesn't work. So I do use quite a few spray bottles. These are just a few of them. I also have another spray bottle in another workspace that I have. And I'm going to let the water just kind of sit where it will. I'm not going to spread it out or anything. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just getting it on there for now. I'm going to grab a brush and I don't know, maybe I'll grab, I had my Red Bud paints out. These are handmade paints. I was using them last night. Maybe I'll just play with those. Keep it kind of simple. Play around with some colors. Maybe we'll try the color I'm going to use is called Magnolia. I'll get that going. Maybe a little bit of ranunculus. And maybe a bit of lavender. And just kind of spread those around. Play with the colors, see what they do. Maybe I'm going to drop in a little bit of apricot zinnia. Apricot. I don't know if it's a from where you are thing or it's just how you grow up. I don't know how people know how to pronounce it. I think I said apricot. I don't think I said apricot growing up. But I will sometimes mix it up because I don't really know. Probably like potato. Okay. So I am just getting color on the paper. Not really concerned with a certain idea, not being tied to a reference photo necessarily. You can start with a reference, obviously. I'm just decided to dive in and kind of just see where it takes me. And that's kind of fun too because it gives you a bit of a freedom that maybe you don't normally have if you're tied to a reference photo, trying to replicate something, right? Trying to get it exact. And I have been doing that more so than I used to, working from reference photos. And it's fun as well. It's challenging for me still though. They don't come naturally to me. I get very stuck in painting what I see, right? Feeling the need to paint exactly what I see. And I'm not so good at that. I struggle with painting what I see. I struggle with details. I struggle with drawing out stuff. So for me, this kind of free, organic feeling kind of stuff just calls to me much more. I'm not a natural artist by born with, I'm not one of those people born with natural talent. So everything I do, I've had to just practice and practice over and over and over. And so that's, I guess, why it appeals to me so much, this organic, intuitive style painting, just to kind of, I don't know, it just feels right to me. So in art, don't let people tell you how something should be done or tell you that, oh no, don't use that, you can't use that. Watercolor artists, true watercolor artists don't use that kind of thing. They don't use black paint, they don't use white paint, they don't use white gouache, all these things. You must leave white space if you need, to save white. You have to save it. All these things. There's a lot of like rules and things that people put on your shoulders or put on your weigh you down, and you don't have to do any of that crap. Just do what you want. Make art the way you want to do it. If it makes you happy, yay, that's what you should be doing. And if it doesn't, then finish it out and start over, because you're going to learn something from everything. No matter what you're doing, if you don't like this, you're going to learn something. I learned something from every single thing I do. I'm gonna grab some green. I'm just dabbing off paint a little bit onto a cloth here so that I'm not getting a ton of paint and a ton of water. So the thing is, I have a lot of water going right here, right? I don't want to introduce a ton more water because it's just going to water everything down even more. And there's paper on the water, paper in the paint, paper on the, water everywhere. So it's heavily watered. And I want these kind of things to kind of stay and do fun stuff. So I don't want to wash all this fun, magical stuff away necessarily. I'm gonna now take a darker green, a lichen color, and maybe a little bit of snake plant. Snake plant's one of my favorite colors of hers. It's a green, and it's a darker green. And I always like to add my darker greens at the edge and kind of pull them in like I'm doing versus dragging them all the way through. I like to bring from side to side and end somewhere in the middle. And I think that can really help keep white space, especially if you're struggling with retaining white space in your paintings. And if you don't paint, then go grab your Crayola, your kids, your own whatever you have, and paint, because why not? There's so many YouTube videos out there. If you need a new hobby, I mean, I don't know, it's a pretty darn good hobby if you ask me. Yep. Great hobby, keeps your mind busy. It's like art therapy for me. It is art therapy. It's not like art therapy. It's the art therapy that I never knew I needed. I mean, I knew I needed therapy. Don't get me wrong. I think we all can use a little bit. Oh, process all that stuff we've never processed. And then some, or something like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is maybe grab some of that lighter green. It's called moss green, and maybe touch that back in there a little bit so that we have some fun stuff going on back there. And we see maybe little bits of different colors. Drop those around anywhere. Just kind of here and there. Then I'm going to go back in with a liner brush, which is just a thin brush. I'm going to get a mixture and maybe just drop some more colors in a few spots. And then I'm going to suggest some trees back here. By suggesting them, I'm going to literally make blobs in hopes that, again, they just suggest some trees in the background. They don't even suggest it. Maybe they don't even look like it, right? They're just telling your eye that there's something back there. Some foliage, you don't have to know what kind of trees they are. You don't even have to know how to paint a tree, right? You're just getting something back there so that your eye sees something in the distance and it pushes it back and brings other stuff forward. That's what that does. And so let's grab a little bit more dark color and maybe just drop some little colors in here. We'll grab some orange and maybe drop some orange colors in there just to give some variation, some depth. Maybe you splatter, maybe you use a different brush, maybe you don't do any of this at all, maybe you added too much and you need to kind of get rid of some of that. You want to go back in with your darker color and go against your light colors so that it has some sort of contrast there. You can take your liner brush and just start making little grasses. Paper's still wet, so everything's going to bleed, which is fine. We're just suggesting little bits and stuff. So that's all we're doing. Nothing has to be perfect at all. This is all practice. So it takes the pressure off if you're just practicing, especially like I'm using the back of this paper. So using this back of this paper takes all the pressure off, right? Because technically it's a scrap piece of paper. If you're afraid to paint in your sketchbook, what I always do, I never paint my first page. I just skip a few pages and go dive in somewhere else. It takes the pressure off completely for me because I don't have to make that first page look all, like I would hope that it would, and I know it's not going to because of the pressure. So that is one way to do it. Just adding a few little more things. I'm going to stand up and look at my work because that's what I like to do. I like to see what's going on, to see what I have going on. So looks like kind of an egg yolk up here. It's okay. If the paper was still wet, I could sort of brush that away and kind of do things, but it's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry my paper and see what else I want to add. So I will mute you for that so you don't have to listen to this dryer. All right, when the paper feels room temperature, it's dry. On the left side is dry. This right hand side, it's a little wet still. I'm gonna dry a little bit more. I don't want to leave it that wet. Okay, so the reason you don't want to leave it that wet is because once you add more paint to this, it'll push and it'll go and it'll move where you might not want it to. Now that the paper is all dry, I can decide what step I want to do next. So I'll often look at my work. Sometimes I'm tempted to just leave it like this, sort of just nice and light and blurry, and kind of makes you wonder what might be, you know, off in the distance. I could add some more, not some more, but I could add some details that are not fuzzy. See how everything's pretty fuzzy, right? So it's all farther away. So what we could do is just add some, maybe some grasses up here if we wanted to. We could go in some of these and maybe just add some more details. You can also do that. Drop your brush. So then what we do once we add those little details, I like to take my brush, rinsed off with water, and just kind of blur those in a little bit so that we can then come back and play on those. So maybe if I add a little few over here, like I said, rinse my brush, come back and just sort of blend those out a little bit. Then you could add some more color to that wet area, and it will kind of do its naturally bleeding thing because there's water to move, and you can let it do a little bit of organic movement there too. All right, let's add a few little grassy things here, just sort of scribbling here and there, and then we just go back like I was saying and blur that a little bit. That looks a little unfinished, so let's give it some more little grassy areas here. I tend to like to push away from my source versus pulling in, but I know people do it different ways. All right, so now I'm gonna go back in with this orange color that I did those flowers with, and maybe I just drop in a little bit of almost splatter looking, very unintentionally, but trying to be intentional at the same time. It's kind of hard for me. That's usually why I do like to just end up splattering versus trying to get in there like that. There we go. Okay, so what I also could do is add some trees in here. I could add other things. I'm definitely gonna add some birds. So let's add some birds, and then I'll think about if I want to add anything else at all. I'm very tempted to leave it as is. I'm going to mix up some dark color, and how I do that, I can take a dark color itself and then just start mixing other dark colors with it. I can take a black or a neutral tint. I can do it kind of any way. You can just use a dark blue. This was taking a little bit too long, so I'm just going to grab this black by another paint maker and use it, water it down for birds. You want hints of birds, right? Not giant dark birds. So I'm going to dry off my brush so that there's no dripping water on the ferrule, and I'm just going to very lightly, I don't talk while I'm going to do my birds, very lightly, very lightly. And another just hint of a bird, right? A suggestion of a bird. Not trying to draw the bird in detail. I like V-shaped birds. I know some people have a thing against them. You know, it's personal preference. Okay, so I think, let me stand up and look one more time. I will add some trees. It looks messy and unfinished. Very messy and very unfinished. So I'm going to take some of my snake plant green color and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of lichen. I can mix it with a little bit of morning glory, which is a blue. I'm just trying to get a dark color for my trees here mixed up. I do prefer to use a dark color. But these are farther away, so I don't want to make it too dark, right? Because these trees are in the distance. And then we're going to pick a spot. Let's just pick right here. And we'll draw our line down, and we're just going to loosely and very quickly, not overthink it, just stick some happy little trees in there. Happy little trees. Different heights. Don't make them all the same. Don't make them the same sizes and don't make them the same height, right? Okay. Now what we can do is take our brush, rinse it off, dry it off, maybe just a little bit of water, and lower those bottoms of those trees. I dried it off too much. Lower those bottoms of those trees so that we have them blending into the ground versus just sort of floating there. Okay, we've got some trees off in the distance. Let's add a tree or two to this side, just so it's not, oops, that was a little too dark. Okay, so if you go too dark, just take your cloth, boop, dab it off a little bit, and you can sort of start over, right? And just make it a little bit lighter, water down your paint, right? The way you get lighter paint in watercolor is just water down the color you're working with. The trick to watercolor is to find out, you know, what water ratio works best for you, what you're able to help sort of control a little bit more than, you know, not, and go from there. So these ones are a little more fuzzier, so they're going to automatically push back if they're lighter, right? Okay, so see what I did right here? You can see where that water is absolutely going. So I didn't successfully do this great. I did make a line, so I'm going to try to blur that out, but odds are I'll just end up making more lines, and that's okay too. It happens. Sometimes you just embrace it and pretend that it was supposed to happen, and it's part of what you're doing, and that's okay too. So I'll just blur this one just a little bit. This brush is harder to work with when doing this sort of thing. You have to, it has a big learning curve, this brush I'm using right here. It's one of my favorites, but it also has a really, really, really hard learning curve. Okay, so just again, here what we can do is we can switch to a round, which I need anyway because I'm going to do a little bit of splattering. Let's switch to this round. This is a Shimoni round, size 6. I do prefer a size 4 for this kind of stuff, but let's just, oh yeah, see, it's not doing something that I love. Let's go back with the brush that I was using for the trees and just fill in this tree a little bit more. If your tree's not working out, you can always make one of them taller to kind of help change the heights of the other one. Okay, I think I'm gonna be done with it, messing with it. We've been going 18 minutes so far. I wanted to keep these a little shorter. I was going 30 minutes before, and my family is coming back home very shortly. So I do want to get going. These are my shimmers, some of them. I'm going to pick one. What I do highly recommend with shimmers is covering your workspace. So shimmers like to go everywhere and they go far. So what I do is I take all my, I have my papers and I cover up all but the little bitty spot that I want the shimmer to go. Because otherwise, this shimmer goes everywhere, and I don't like it. I don't like cleaning off all my stuff. At first, I thought, oh, it's cute. There's shimmer everywhere, right? Who doesn't like shimmery glitter stuff on their stuff? Mm-mm. Nope, 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 nope. So I'm just going to splatter. The trick to shimmer is you do want to get it pretty darn soupy, right? Pretty liquidy. But then you also want to take your brush and roll it on your cloth so that you're not introducing a ton of water, just water, right? You want a perfect consistency for the paint. Now, see, I took too much off. You want the perfect consistency for the paint and the water and the brush that you're using. And this isn't the normal brush I use. I usually, like I said, I use the round size 4, so perhaps this brush is just a little bit different for me for splattering. And that's why I use the same brush all the time, normally, because I like to know that that brush consistently works well and does splatters that I really like, and I know how much water to use with it. So I do highly recommend that you dedicate one brush that you end up really liking for your splatter. It doesn't mean that you can't use it for other stuff as well. It just means that that's the one you'll grab every time you splatter so that you have consistent splatters. What we can also do if we wanted to, we could get our stuff back, grab our size 4 so we have consistent splatters that are smaller. Grab a little bit of my dark green. I think I just put too much water in it. I want to be careful again with that. Roll it just a little bit, and I just want a few See, those are too much. A few dark splatters. I say too much water. That's what happens when you use too much water. So if you do that, see how I have too much on there? Let me show you. Too much, right? So what we do is just take our cloth or our finger. I don't like to get paint on my hands, so I'm just going to dab it off. You can also just take your brush and sort of just smush it a little bit. Some of this is on the tape, so I don't think it'll be as bad as I think. That one's a little dark. I'm gonna stand up and look so I get the full picture. Yeah, I don't love this piece in general. It was an exploration piece, which is fine, and that's great. It should be, right? We should keep exploring. We should test out new things. We should try new things, and that should absolutely be a thing. And we don't have to love everything we create. Sometimes it's just to create something. Sometimes it's to get lost in making something. Sometimes it's just to maybe tune your kids out because they're driving you insane. Maybe your husband's driving you insane. Maybe your spouse is driving you insane. Your partner, whoever. Sometimes you just need a little break from reality, from life. So instead of maybe picking up a book or a show, I will often grab my art, and I always have it out so that I can jump on and paint whenever I want. All right, well, anyway, thank you for joining me today. It's not perfect, but it was fun, and it was full of exploration and full of color play, and I had fun doing it. So that's all that matters, right? I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.